there a world in which Democrats should have a backup plan for Joe Biden?
A backup plan?
If he needed to be replaced on the ticket. If we're 3 months out and Trump's still beating him in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina.
I mean, I think the backup plan is run a better campaign. Biden hasn't been disqualified from running for the presidency, but anything having to do with any of his performance. It's just that it's going to be a tough fight.
Yeah.
And so I think the backup plan is fight harder. Yeah. The backup plan is make sure you win the Senate. The backup plan is people should volunteer earlier and do more and give more money and do all of those things.
We're going to bring Rachel Maddow and Ana Kasparian back on the After Show Carnage channel. Rachel Maddow's take on Joe Biden back in 2024 was something else, wasn't it? She suggested that what the country needed most was boring. And wow, did she deliver? Just not in the way she thought. Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks, of course, partner with Cenk Uygur, roasted Maddow. We're aligning on this one, Ana, during this segment. You can unblock me on X now, pointing out the absurdity of her shifting blame to voters instead of owning her own missteps. Rachel Maddow tried to spin her way out of the 2024 flops. She can't act like the intellectual moral high ground when the 24 election pretty much proved that she's just a average Joe. She's just an average rainbow person. She claimed the audience just didn't grasp the dictator phobia J.D. Vance allegedly embodied. Ana Kasparian's critique on the Young Turks is about how Maddow couldn't admit, yeah, I got it wrong. That's all she had to say. Ana hilariously makes fun of her, saying the only thing more boring was watching Rachel Maddow herself every night. Rachel Maddow actually isn't boring. I just wish she would use her intellect for some good.
That was MSNBC host Rachel Maddow back in June of 2024. And keep that in mind when you consider that Semaphore spoke to key media figures across digital, print, and legacy media, Republicans and Democrats, to discuss the things that they got wrong in 2024. And judging by that video you just watched, Rachel Maddow did get some things wrong. The question is, did she learn a damn thing about it? Well, rather than citing her real mistakes and terrible predictions, she actually ended up blaming her audience. So here's her statement to Semaphore. She said, I thought people would be more unnerved by J.D. Vance, less the cat lady thing and more the Americans are going to have to get over the dictator phobia Mencius Moldbug thing. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Mencius Moldbug, that's a pseudonym for Curtis Yarvin, who Vance has followed for years. And Curtis Yarvin is someone who's against liberal democracy and is in favor of a monarchy, though he seems to have a tough time defending that position. Cenk Uygur actually interviewed him about it, and it was embarrassing if you ask me. But on October 1st, Gallup released the following poll comparing voter ratings between Tim Walz, who was the VP pick for Kamala Harris, and J.D. Vance. And yeah, I mean, she is right that people didn't seem to fear J.D. Vance as much as she was hoping for. So at that point in time, in October of 2024, less than half of registered voters nationally had a positive view of Tim Walz or J.D. Vance. A combined 46% rate Walz as either an excellent or pretty good choice versus 41% for J.D. Vance. And despite Walz's slight lead on this measure, the two were equally likely to be rated as poor choices. Just under 4 in 10 voters see each as such. So she is right that people didn't buy into the fear mongering about J.D. Vance as much as she hoped for, but to kind of pivot to what she believes her audience got wrong, or the Democratic voters got wrong, or voters in general got wrong, instead of taking ownership of the things she got wrong, is kind of amazing. But what do you think, Cenk?
All right, pause it right there. Did you catch that? Cenk just said that Rachel Maddow's commentary was indecipherable to the average person. And honestly, he's not wrong. Imagine being somebody just trying to figure out if they can afford eggs this week, and you're hit with the meniscus mold bug. Like it's the password to get into an Illuminati meeting. Curtis Yarvin, monarchy, dictator phobia. Most people's reactions to this would be, what are you talking about? These type of things just make her out of touch. She doesn't relate to normal people. They're not sitting around the dinner table watching MSNBC. Keep in mind, if Rachel Maddow wants to get on a podcast and get in deep on these things, I think she might be able to pull that off. But on MSNBC, their demographic is what, 50, 55 plus? They're not around the dinner table saying, you know what's really bothering me? J.D. Vance's niche fascination with the 18th century political structure. No, they're more concerned about your normal everyday stuff. Common sense, that's how Donald Trump pulled it off. Anyway, back to the script. Rachel didn't just miss the plot. She seemed to have wandered into an entirely different library. Let's see how that worked out for her.
Yeah, so I mean, look, even that quote is telling because it's indecipherable to the average person. Get over dictatorphobia, Mencius Moblugs. Like, what are you talking about? So look, I interviewed Curtis Yarvin, as Anna pointed out, so I know what she's talking about. The average person doesn't, and nobody knows about Curtis Yarvin. And yeah, he's comical and ridiculous, and that's why I'm worried about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, and that's why I voted against them. But the average guy doesn't know that Curtis Yarvin is in favor of a monarchy, which is actually a dictatorship, which is what J.D. Vance was, the fact that J.D. Vance is in favor of that is problematic, etc. So one, out of touch with what actual human beings are going through. They're worried about gas prices and food prices. They're not worried about Mencius mold bug who they've never heard of. And secondly, and even more importantly, she's saying, damn it, the fear-mongering didn't work.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. I mean, it's amazing that, look, I'm always amazed at the, I guess, allergic reaction to any self-reflection at all. It's okay to admit that you got things wrong. It's actually admirable when people admit, especially people in media who are supposed to be, sharing accurate information. It's okay to say, look, I got that wrong. In fact, we're gonna give you examples of people who actually did take ownership, and I give them a lot of credit for that. It builds credibility when you're willing to admit when you've gotten something wrong. And by the way, remember, this is what she said when Joe Biden ultimately ended up dropping out of the presidential race.
Just thinking about the president right now, what a man, what a patriot. What an act of selfless devotion to your country. And he has been a phenomenal president. He ended the presidency of Donald Trump at one disastrous term. And he did it while being decent and civil and honorable and normal and occasionally boring at a time when boring was absolutely what we needed. And I just, his career of decades in public service as a senator and as a very successful vice president and as a phenomenally successful president, there is no single thing that he has done in that entire career that is a greater or more consequential act of service and sacrifice to this country.
Girl, the American public were getting boring every night with your MSNBC show. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Okay, to sum it up, Rachel Maddow swung and she just missed. She, instead of owning up her mistakes, her being wrong, would have been a good moment for her to say, here's what I got wrong. She decided to throw shade at her audience for not being enlightened enough to care about Curtis Yarvin, about his monarchy enthusiasm, because clearly that's the problem, and not her fear-mongering and people looking at her and they don't think she has much. They think she has a lot of book smarts, but not much common sense. But I will give her credit. She just reminded us why people don't trust corporate media. She reminded us why people tune out legacy media. That might be why you're watching this channel right now. If you're going to make wild predictions and get them wrong, I've done it many times. Just own up with it. Just own up to it with some grace, some jokes or something. Self-deprecating humor, something. Rachel, I really love watching these clips. These people on corporate media, they will get you. If they don't antagonize you, then they'll make you laugh.
The next clip is ready below. Welcome to After Show Carnage.